Alrighty. Well, good evening, everybody, whoever happens to be watching this. It's about 8 p.m., July 8th. I'm Andre Stackhouse. You're watching my YouTube channel, Public Stackhouse, and I'm announcing, that I'm running for governor. So, what you're seeing over there on the right is my website, publicstackhouse.org. And it is the website of the Stackhouse for Governor campaign. So, um, what is going on with all of this? So, let me just start by taking a little look here at my event calendar. You can see today's the 8th. Washington State is a vote by mail state. So, people should be receiving their ballots on the 19th, which is a little over a week from now. Then there's an 18-day voting period with ballots due on August 6th. So you can see here, August 6th is when primary ballots are due. So I'm in the Washington State Open Jungle Primary, which means that all candidates across all parties will appear on the primary ballot, which is due August 6th. And then the top two will move on to the general election, which is in November 5th, general election day. So same day that you vote for president is when you would vote for me for governor if I make it through the primary, which again, primary ballots due on August 6th. You should be receiving them in your mail soon if you're in Washington and you're registered to vote. Speaking of, please register to vote so you can vote in this election and get your ballots rather than having to go find a ballot or print your ballot. It's way easier if you're just registered and then you get sent it in the mail. And then you can drop it right into your mailbox without any postage. So I really like living in a vote by mail state, and we are coming up on our next election. So that is the sort of election calendar that we're looking at, and I wanted to go into my platform just a bit with you all. So you can see that the tagline for my platform is "Make Washington Affordable," and I've highlighted kind of the four key issues of this campaign. The United States is going through a massive affordability crisis, and Washington is one of the most expensive states to live in. So my platform is intended to be fairly comprehensive, and there are at least 17 different sort of positions on this platform. But the four that I really lead with are universal health care, a housing guarantee, tuition-free higher education, and a living wage. And I'm not saying that this would solve every single one of our problems, but in my opinion, these are the areas of life that are becoming very, very unaffordable and which are holding people back from really pursuing the life that they want to live. So housing and healthcare are two incredibly important issues that have a very symbiotic relationship between one another, because healthcare costs remain the number one cause of bankruptcy in both Washington and the United States. We pay about twice as much in this country for our healthcare system compared to most other industrialized wealthy nations. And yet those nations have universal health care and everyone is covered, and it doesn't really cost you anything when you go see the doctor. And in our country, not only are we paying twice as much, but many people do not have health care. And even people who do are paying a lot for it. They're often underinsured and have really, really high and unexpected out-of-pocket costs. So this is the number one cause of bankruptcy, and bankruptcy often leads to housing instability. So a guarantee to housing is intended to keep a roof over everyone's head. And I know that there are many causes of homelessness, and it's a challenging problem to solve. But the thing is, being homeless is incredibly bad for your health. So many people are on the street because of the way that our healthcare system is broken, and yet that makes them even more unhealthy and raises their healthcare costs even more, which makes it even more unlikely that they're going to be able to afford housing. So if we're thinking long term, if we're thinking about preventing the worst outcomes in people's lives, keeping a roof over their head, keeping their prescriptions filled, making sure they can see the doctor at least once a year, making sure that they stay on top of their dental health. These have incredible preventative capabilities when it comes to preventing poverty, preventing homelessness. And in the case of people who have already slipped through those cracks, this is the exact help that they need. Um, when you're young or you're trying to better your life, education is often the path that we are recommended, but education remains incredibly expensive. Um, so, we're all entitled to a free K through 12 education, but that really doesn't keep you competitive in a modern global economy. And so this is really just saying we need to expand that to go beyond K through 12 and to include higher education. And I propose that this covers not just public universities, but also community college, as well as trade programs. And in fact, while we see, many jobs being lost across certain industries and certain sectors, it's often the trades where we see the highest demand for new employment. So I think there are many great jobs out there that are just looking for qualified people to fill them, and anyone who's making an honest effort to uh, to acquire the credentials they need to do those jobs ought to be able to do so without financial hardship. Um, and then the last is a living wage, because you know it is so common that people are hardworking, and they are trying their best, and yet they just cannot maintain the basics of life, like many of these things that I mentioned. So the idea of a living wage is that one, it should cover, all of the basics that you need to thrive in life. And the second is that this should not be a political football in which we need to, every few years, collectively organize to have our minimum wage just raised enough to keep up with inflation. So the idea of a living wage is that it's based on cost of living. It's adjusted for inflation, and not just inflation on the dollar, but even inflation of things like healthcare, housing, food, utilities. And this is basically intended to make sure that that employers are paying their entire workforce enough such that people aren't just getting pushed into public programs in which that falls on the taxpayer. If you're not paying your employees enough to keep a roof over their head, and then they're ending up in public housing, well, we all pay for that. So we need to set up an economy in which people work and they're paid enough, and they're not worried about things like keeping a roof over their head. Um, there are many other issues here. I guess I'll go over the next two because I think these are fairly easy for people to grasp. The rest can get just a little bit wonkish for this stream. I think we might have time to go over them in a lot more detail later. But universal basic dividend. So a lot of people have heard of universal basic income. Andrew Yang made that issue fairly mainstream. But the idea of a universal basic dividend is that instead of paying a set amount every month, it would pay out a percentage of business profits. And that way, this program could never be bankrupt. It could never run out of money. Yes, on a stronger economic year, it would pay out more, and then on a weaker one, it would pay out less. But that would also mean that it would be a reduction in the amount that businesses paid into it. So if they're having a tough year, then maybe more of that needs to be reinvested into their business anyway. And it's based after the Alaska Permanent Fund, which does a very similar thing with its oil industry. And I'm simply proposing that we do this across a sort of cross-section of Washington's industries rather than just oil. Fair, free public transit, and I'm honestly proposing a number of expansions to transit. But fair, free public transit, again, this is just the idea that transportation is one of the things that is expensive. Owning a car is expensive. It requires you to pay for car insurance and to regularly keep your fuel tank full. And so by expanding public transit, by making it fare free, we're basically able to tell people that wherever it is you need to go, you don't need to pay to get there. So whether it's your job, whether it's where you go to school, whether it's the hospital, This is not something where the only way to access these things is to participate in the car industry. And cars cause all sorts of issues, but while people like cars and cars are gonna be around for a while, what we're trying to do is reduce car dependency, give people an affordable way to get where they need to go. So, I'm running for governor. Ballots due on August 6th. Register to vote so you can get them. And I hope to win your support, whether I already have it or whether you're just hearing about it right now. So please, please check it out. Please reach out if you have questions. And you can see if you go to the About section, there's a contact page, and you'll see that you can use this contact form, or you can just email publicstackhousePlusInfo@gmail.com. But that is the Stackhouse for Governor campaign. And I'm just going to go ahead and answer a few questions that came in. So the person who emailed requested to remain anonymous, but I'm going to go ahead and read these questions anyway and do my best to answer them. So first one, as a lesbian and transgender individual, I'm happy with a lot of the protections against discrimination afforded to myself when it comes to working and finding housing, as well as the extremely necessary access to medical care. I would like to confirm that those protections would not be going anywhere if you were to become governor, at least to the best of your ability. Do you have plans to strengthen and maintain those protections? So let me start by saying that I'm running for governor, and it is my intention to not scale back any protections I'm not trying to scale back anyone's rights or protections, legal protections. And so, yes, my plan is 100% to strengthen and maintain these protections, and I really put the emphasis on strengthen. So I tend to believe that that we need to be expanding our rights in general to more people, and also to more reliably have those rights ourselves. So when it comes to transgender care, I look at this as something that needs to be expanded as part of our general expansions to healthcare. So right now, yes, you have a right to healthcare, you have a right to gender transition care, but many people just can't afford it. Universal healthcare is not just, an affirmation of your right to these things, but saying we need to remove the economic barriers so you have the practical ability to pursue these things, not just the theoretical right. So whether we're talking about that housing guarantee or the universal healthcare system, the idea is this is going to ensure that you not only have a right to these things, but that you're able to pursue them as much as you need, whether or not you have the economic means to do so today. So, next question. I found that when traversing the medical system with state-sponsored healthcare, it is difficult to maintain my dignity as a trans person, requiring myself to be outed by my legal name constantly. Oftentimes, they hand-wave me when I ask them to use my preferred name, stating that they, quote, legally must state it, unquote, when interacting. This, I believe, is dishonest, and while I'm no lawyer, I've had no success in finding the law that would require that. What, if anything, are your plans for maintaining and affirming the dignity of trans people traversing government systems in the companies that accept government funding? So, I'm not aware of this law either. I am also not a lawyer. So, I think the first thing that we need to really do is determine what the law says about this. And certainly, I don't think that doctors or hospitals should be stating any kind of legal requirement unless it truly is a legal requirement. If it is a legal requirement, then, they're just doing their jobs, and, maybe that's a law that we can look into and change. And I think the first thing we would need to understand is what exactly the law is, who made it, why it's there, how long it's been there, and make sure that if we amend this law to address this issue, that we don't accidentally create another issue that, we were trying to avoid. So, for instance, if this is your legal name, I would understand why, for instance, on paperwork it might be important to have the legal name written down. But that doesn't mean that the paperwork couldn't also include a preferred name, right? It's relevant information. I also think that while There may be certain circumstances in which to receive medical consent, it's important to make sure that the correct legal name was used to make sure there's no confusion about who's being referred to. I think that in many, if not most, interactions with a healthcare provider, there shouldn't really be a problem in using one's preferred name. And, I'm sure that Christophers get called Chris all the time when they're talking to their doctor. So I think that, we can expand that to the case of people who may prefer a different name because of their gender transition. Okay, next question. One thing that I've personally found vexing is the difficulty in changing my legal name, mainly the length of time and cost. While it is significantly better than my previous home state of Texas, I am not a wealthy individual by any means, so the cost is difficult to cover, and even with the waiver of cost form, it requires a level of means testing that is rather upsetting. I understand that this specific thing would be of low priority to a campaign. However, if you do have plans to change this, what do you plan to do that will lower or eliminate means testing when it comes to those who need help paying their way through legal processes like name changes and the like? And what, if anything, can be done about arbitrary wait times, like the 30-day mandatory wait if you pay with anything other than cash? So I don't happen to know a ton about this process. But I don't really say, and by the way, it's not in my platform specifically, but that doesn't mean that, I wouldn't do anything about this as governor. But I guess what I'll say is I don't see any reason why it should cost very much money at all to change one's name. In my opinion, for something like that, I can't think of a great reason to have anything other than a nominal fee. But wait times, I think that there might be reasons for wait times, but again, I don't see why there would be a wait time if you pay with card, but not a wait time if you pay with cash. In my opinion, if it's arbitrary, if it's, we shouldn't use wait times to encourage you to pay in a certain way. It should be, it costs a certain amount, the wait time is what it is, and pay for it with legal money, and we're good. Now, would I remove these fees? I think potentially we would look into that. We'd see what these fees, how high they are, and how we could raise the money, if necessary. I can't imagine that this costs the system very much, but I don't think that fees are really the best way to collect that kind of money. And in general, I'm not a fan of means testing. I think that services should be free and universal. And the only fees, wait periods, all of these things, these should only be in place to prevent abuse. So I don't consider a person going through gender transition and changing their name. This is common. This is not a form of abuse. And it should really be, this is not an area, it's hard enough to transition. So we don't need to make changing one's name adding to that difficulty. On the other hand, I don't think we want people changing their names all the time for no reason. And I think that, we don't, there are reasons for this, right? I think that people have good reasons for changing their name, but if they're doing it because they're a con artist or they're trying to do tax evasion, that's not something that we need to protect. So I think that, most people who have sincere reasons for changing their name tend to only do it a few times in their life. And that is something that shouldn't really be too much difficulty for the state to handle. It shouldn't cost the individual that much money. And I think that from what you describe, we could probably do a lot better on that. And then last question, what are your plans on the off chance that you win the election for governor and Trump wins the presidential election to protect the citizens from the sweeping changes planned by their Project 2025 proposal and all their planned cuts to public funds and protections? Well, Project 2025 is a multifaceted attack on our democracy. And so I think that the only way to push back against it is a multifaceted expansion to democracy. And I've already touched on that in a number of ways, right? I'm saying that we need to expand our right to healthcare, expand our right to housing. And a major theme of my campaign is that Washington state cannot rely on the federal government to deliver the kind of funding for the kind of society that we want to live in. It has been something that the federal government has failed to do my entire life. And I think we need to stop accepting excuses from politicians saying, well, that needs federal funding. That, we can only do that with the federal government. I reject that. I think that there really is nothing that Washington State couldn't do. In my opinion, we have the population and economy of a major nation. We are every bit as rich as the sort of large social democracies of say Europe. So there's no reason we couldn't have the same level of infrastructure and public programs. And I think that if we take the steps to make those a reality in Washington, then we won't have to worry so much about when these are being scaled back federally. Yes, our federal representatives and our state government should be pushing back against these things. And I don't think we need to just accept federal policy at face value. So, for instance, Washington State is a state that has legalized cannabis, something I'm very supportive of. And cannabis remains illegal at the federal level. But we found that we were able to legalize it here, and it's worked out pretty well. And I think that on other issues, like, say, marriage equality, marriage equality is something that we were a leader on in Washington. And so even if that gets scaled back federally, it would remain legal in Washington, and that is a good thing. And I think we've seen this, yet another time recently with the repeal of Roe v. Wade, and for many states and many people, that has created limitations on their access to reproductive care. But in Washington, abortion was legal before Roe v. Wade, and then it remains legal after the repeal of Roe v. Wade. So that is really the direction that we need to go, is expanding our rights and our democracy. And if you scroll to the bottom of my platform page, you'll actually see a pretty comprehensive democracy expansion plank to my platform. So I encourage you to look into it. We can introduce things like ranked choice voting so that we elect our representatives through a more democratic voting system. We can expand people's ability to vote through things like Election Day as a holiday. We can do public campaign finance. We can strengthen our ballot initiative process. So there are many ways in which we can kind of put the people more in charge of the state, and push back against reactionary and corporate interests. So thank you for writing in with those questions. Again, if you want to write into the campaign, it's publicstackhouse+info@gmail.com, or just publicstackhouse@gmail.com. Just helps me stay organized if you use that info alias. And before I sign off today, I just want to say, if you like what you see here and you want to take the first step towards showing your support, go to publicstackhouse.org/pledge, and you can fill out this pledge to vote form to let me know that you're planning on voting for me. And I can help make sure that you get your ballot and it gets sent in. And it just helps me know that I've got support out there and strategize the rest of my campaign. So you can do it from your phone or your computer. It's really easy to do. It takes like 2 seconds. And that is the easiest way to support this campaign. The second easiest way to support this campaign would then be to share the link and tell a friend, hey, I heard about this pretty cool campaign for governor. I pledged to vote for it, and I think you should too. So publicstackhouse.org/pledge. Please fill out the pledge to vote. If you're not in Washington, that's fine. But you can still volunteer. You can still donate. There's lots more ways to get involved. But word of mouth is key to getting out the vote on this. So please, don't just be excited in your head. Don't just keep it online. Tell a friend. And help me generate a bit of buzz. So that's it for today. I'm hoping to go live a little bit more often and get a little bit more into the details of what this campaign is, as well as things that aren't related to this campaign. I'm hoping to build a little bit more presence on YouTube here in general, and to build that engaged audience. I want to teach you what's going on and how to really be civically engaged. and to connect with me and help me understand what you're interested in and how I can advance that in Washington's politics. So, thank you for tuning in. I wish you all the best, and till the next time. All right. Night, everyone.